Hey guys, happy Easter. As many of you have probably discovered, there is no yeast in the stores. I was lucky enough to score a bag of flour, but that was about it. And to try to make this Easter special, I am trying to make something that my mom made when I was a kid. It was a Easter sweetbread, and it had eggs that were dyed and put in it. Now, mind you, you need yeast, and I cannot get yeast anywhere. So I thought I would try to create a sourdough starter. Now, I created the sourdough starter earlier in the week, and I watched the Elliott Homestead on YouTube. She does a dry starter. Now, one thing I liked about the dry starter was I could store it in my fridge, and I just had to reactivate it when I needed it, and then I do not have to continually feed it every day, because I would probably do that for about a week and then I wouldn't do it anymore and I'd have to throw it out. So to reactivate the starter and get it ready for us to use, you have to feed it. So in watching hers, now mind you, any mistakes are all mine. She has done this for a long time and knows what she's doing. But she said to use about 30 grams of the sourdough starter. Mind you, I started this earlier in the week. Now, I do not have a scale, did not have time to order a scale on Amazon, and didn't really feel like going to the store to get a scale. So this is part of the experiment process of this whole thing. I am hoping this will work out. Next, she said to use 130 grams of water. I, again, don't have a scale. So I tried to convert that into cups, and that gave me 0.69 grams of water. So you pour that over the starter. All right, so this is now dissolved. I don't know if you can see that. So now she said to put in 120 grams of all-purpose flour. Again, no scale. So that comes out to 0.59 cups of flour. I realize all of you baking people are probably cringing right now because, let's be honest, true bakers have a scale and they're going to use it. But I honestly don't bake a lot, and I'm just trying to do something special for my family for Easter. So now I'm going to kind of knead it just a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to cover this, put it in a dark spot. Okay, so my sourdough has started to get the bubbles and everything. So it looks like we are activated. And since we are not using yeast, we're trying to do the sourdough, we have to adjust the dry and the wet ingredients a little bit. So this whole recipe calls for 2.5 cups of flour and 2/3 cup of milk. Because I have already used flour and water in my starter to activate my starter, I now am going to use 1.25 cups of flour and 1/3 cups of milk. Now, one thing we have to do is they want us to melt our butter and warm our milk together. Now, originally this is going to be because they're wanting to activate the yeast, but I'm going to try to follow the recipe as closely as possible. So I am now only using 1/4 cup of milk, but I will still use 2 tablespoons of butter. And this butter's been sitting out, so it's really soft right now. And they recommended that we put this on the stovetop and let that melt. While that is doing that, we need to mix up our flour, our sugar, and our salt. And we're going to mix that up with our sourdough starter. Now, I'm going to start with 1/4 cup. Now remember, we're going from 2.5 cups of flour to 1.25 cups of the flour. So I'm gonna mix the flour, 1/4 cup, and then I need 1/4 cup of sugar in here also. We'll warm up that milk, and then once we have that all together, we will mix. Salt is only a teaspoon of salt, so I'm just going to be grinding up a little bit of salt for this, and that should be plenty of salt. This is all going to be mixed up in the bowl with my starter. Right now, all we're doing is trying to get this milk warmed up, and they want the butter melted. So we're going to pour that in, our mixture with our starter, our flour, and our sugar. After we add this, we are going to add 2 eggs. All right, so we are going to mix in these eggs, and then we're going to mix in 1/2 cup of this flour. All right, and then we are going to add the last 1/2 cup. I want us to turn this out onto a floured surface and knead the dough for a while. Now, this is really sticky, so I guess it's because of the sourdough, but we may end up with a sticky mess. So we'll see how this goes. I don't know, in my mind, this should not be so sticky. Yeah, this is gonna be a mess to clean up. Honestly, I've never made this recipe before, and so we will see how this goes. This will be an experiment for all of us, right? And I'm going to set this aside for a moment in this bowl that I'm going to throw some oil in, and it's probably too much oil. It just said to coat it, it didn't say how much. So I'm gonna put this in here. I said to coat it. And once you coat it, leave it sitting in there. And then you're to set it aside and put a damp cloth over it for an hour. Okay, I let my dough sit in oil in a warm spot. And to be brutally honest here, I don't think this is gonna work. I messed something up, so I'm not exactly sure. But I'm gonna push through and bake this thing, and I have a feeling I'm gonna have an unleavened bread thing because this is not working. But on a good note, I found this. I forgot I had this in the cabinet. It's for rolling out pastry, so it's easier to clean, and it should be a whole lot easier than cleaning off my butcher block, which I did, and it worked. All right, so now I am supposed to take the flour, roll it out, and we're gonna get this dough out, and that's another thing. I used way too much oil. Way too much oil. So we will see what exactly this does. As you can see, there's way too much oil. So let's sprinkle on some flour. Now we are supposed to roll this out. Now, according to the recipe, this dough was supposed to rise. Now that was because we added the sourdough, or actually we were supposed to add the yeast, which instead I used sourdough because I've been to the store multiple times and I cannot find yeast anywhere. It was supposed to double in volume while it was in the bowl. As you can tell, it did not do this at all. So I have no clue how this is gonna be. Maybe it'll still taste good and it just won't be fluffy, right? Maybe. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. So it says to cut it in half. So I have this thing, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it works really well for dough. And I don't have one of those pastry things. So See how nicely that works? So it says to knead this lightly, put it into 2 pieces, and we're supposed to let it rest. Now mind you, I'm not letting it rest. I know I'm probably making more mistakes, but the problem comes in, I never rose. I've got nothing to rest. It's supposed to rise again, and I have a feeling that since it didn't rise the first time, it doesn't matter what I do at this point, because I don't think this thing is gonna work. But we're gonna keep going, because we started, right? So let's see what we can get out of this. This is where the experiment portion comes. So we're supposed to roll it in 2 rounds because we're going to be braiding this. And it definitely feels doughy. Oh, you know what I'm going to do too? I'm going to pinch off a piece and bake that separately because I want to taste it when this is done without having to cut it. So we're going to pinch these in together, and this is going to be the weirdest looking braid known to man. It almost seems more like tentacles than a braid. See? Look at that. Sometimes you gotta laugh instead of cry, right? There, look. It's almost like a wreath. This is ridiculous. Look, there. I'm gonna go for it. Let's see what happens. I mean, my word, I already wasted all the materials, right? All right, so it's braided. Not very nicely, but braided, as you can see. So these eggs are supposed to just be tucked in between these. And I have 6. It says you only need 5, but we'll see what happens. I like the blue. I think the blue is pretty. And a pink. And a weird looking green blue. You know what? Let's just use them all. This is going to be the weirdest looking bread known to man. All right. I have literally just made a mess. But if you want to see it, this is what it's going to look like right now. Okay, as you can see, I got the bread out of the oven. And as you can also see, it did not rise at all. Something happened, and I had a feeling that something went wrong. So I'll give you a closer look of how it is right now. The eggs definitely did bake, but it did not rise at all, and it is not golden brown, even though I did put butter on it. So I am not sure. As I stated before, I am not someone who is used to baking with a sourdough, and you'll see this is like really, it's not raw inside, it's just chewy. And I think maybe this definitely needed to have the yeast. I'm gonna taste it and see what it's like, but it's not. Now mind you, I was maybe 10 when my mom made this, and I have not seen one since, but I know it didn't look like this. Yeah, it doesn't taste like I thought it would. Very heavy, very dense, a little chewy. Not awful. I'm not going to poison anyone or anything, but you know, since I already made the batter and everything, might as well give it a try. So my recommendation would be to make it with yeast. So wait till yeast is back in the stores, and then you can make your own braided Easter egg bread. And it should turn out much better than this. Maybe after yeast gets back in the store, I will try again with some yeast, and hopefully it will turn out a lot better than this one.